There's a pattern in history that has wiped out the savings of three major populations in the last 65 years. And right now in 2025, multiple countries are entering the exact same pattern stage by stage, trillion by trillion, preparing to execute the same confiscation that destroyed the wealth of millions before them. In 1960, France had printed so much money that the franc was worthless. $1 equaled 493 francs. The government introduced the nouveau franc. The exchange rate, 100 old francs equals 1 new franc. Everyone holding old francs lost 99% of their wealth overnight. In 1994, Brazil's Cruzeiro had inflated so catastrophically that prices doubled every month. The government introduced the real. The exchange rate, 2.75 trillion old Cruzeiros equals 1 real. Every savings account, every pension, every salary denominated in Cruzeiros became worthless. In 1998, Russia's ruble collapsed from Asian financial contagion and oil price crash. The government redenominated. 1,000 old rubles became 1 new ruble. Savings evaporated. Pensions disappeared. The middle class was destroyed. 3 times. 3 currency resets. 3 complete confiscations of private wealth. All following the exact same 5-stage sequence. And here's what should terrify you. Multiple countries right now, Argentina, Turkey, Egypt, Nigeria, are in stage 3 or 4 of this pattern. The denial phase is over. Capital controls are being implemented. The announcements are coming. And when the new currencies are introduced, everyone holding the old currency loses everything. This is the story of how governments reset currencies, why they always claim it's necessary, and why the math says your savings are the target. And it's happening faster than any previous reset in history. Before we go through the pattern, you need to understand what a currency reset actually is. Not a policy reform, legalized theft. A currency reset is when the government declares your money worthless and forces you to exchange it for new money at a confiscatory rate. You have 100,000 in savings. The government announces a reset. 100 old equals 1 new. Your 100,000 becomes 1,000. You just lost 99% of your wealth. Not through inflation over years. Overnight. Through decree. And you have no choice. The old currency is demonetized. It becomes illegal to use. You must exchange it for new currency at the government's rate. Banks are closed during the transition. You can't withdraw. You can't convert to foreign currency. You can't buy assets. You're trapped. And when the banks reopen, your account shows the new amount. 1% of what you had. Your life savings, your pension, your salary, all reduced to nothing. This is currency reset. And it follows a precise 5-stage pattern. Stage 1: denial. The government prints massive amounts of money. Inflation explodes. Prices rise daily. The currency is clearly dying. But the government denies there's a problem. They blame external factors. Speculators. Foreign powers. Greedy businesses. Never the printing. Stage 2: capital controls. As inflation accelerates, people try to escape. They convert local currency to dollars or euros. They move money offshore. They buy gold or property. The government panics. They can't allow capital flight. So they impose controls. Limits on foreign currency purchases. Restrictions on international transfers. Bans on taking cash out of the country. You're locked in. Stage 3: announcement. The government admits the currency is dead. They announce a reset. A new currency will be introduced. The exchange rate will be X old to 1 new. They claim this will stabilize prices and restore confidence. It's framed as reform. It's actually confiscation. Stage 4: new currency introduction. The old currency is demonetized. You have a deadline to exchange it. Maybe 90 days. Maybe 30 days. Sometimes just days. You must go to a bank and exchange old for new at the government rate. The banks control the process. They set daily exchange limits. You can't exchange everything at once. You're forced to hold worthless old currency that's losing value by the hour. And stage 5, old currency worthless. After the deadline, the old currency has no value. You can't spend it. You can't exchange it. It's paper. If you didn't exchange in time, you lost everything. And even if you did exchange, you lost 90% to 99% of your savings. The government claims the reset is success. Inflation is lower in new currency terms. But only because everyone's wealth was destroyed. The debt was inflated away. The government's obligations disappeared. And your savings paid for it. This has happened 3 times in recent history to major economies. Let me show you how it played out. Let's start with the first major currency reset in a developed economy. France, 1958 to 1960. The nouveau franc and the destruction of savings. In 1945, France emerged from World War II with massive debt. The country was destroyed. Infrastructure was ruined. Industry was gone. The government needed to rebuild. They needed money. So they printed. Stage 1, denial. From 1945 to 1958, France printed francs constantly. The money supply increased 20-fold. Prices rose accordingly. In 1945, $1 equaled 50 francs. By 1950, 350 francs. By 1957, 420 francs. By 1958, 493 francs. Nearly 10 times devaluation in 13 years. The franc was dying. Everyone knew it. French citizens hoarded gold. They converted francs to dollars whenever possible. They bought property and hard assets. Inflation was 15% annually in the 1950s. But the government denied there was a currency crisis. They claimed it was temporary adjustment from the war. They blamed reconstruction costs. They blamed foreign speculators. They never admitted the truth. They printed the franc into oblivion. And by 1958, the situation was critical. The franc was so weak that international trade was difficult. French exports were competitive, but nobody trusted the currency. Import prices were exploding. The population was losing confidence. Something had to be done. Stage 2, capital controls. In 1957 and 1958, capital flight accelerated. Wealthy French were moving money to Switzerland, to Britain, to America. The government watched their foreign reserves drain. They responded with controls. Strict limits on foreign currency purchases. Citizens could only buy $100 per year for travel. Businesses needed government approval for international payments. Taking francs out of the country was illegal. Penalties included fines and prison. The controls trapped capital inside France. But they didn't stop the inflation. They just prevented escape. And in 1958, Charles de Gaulle returned to power. He recognized the franc was unsustainable. He ordered the finance ministry to prepare a currency reset. Stage 3 announcement. On December 27, 1958, the government announced the nouveau franc. The new franc would replace the old franc on January 1, 1960. The exchange rate, 100 old francs equal 1 nouveau franc. The government claimed this would restore confidence and simplify transactions. No more dealing in hundreds of thousands of francs. Prices would be reasonable. 500,000 francs for a car becomes 5,000 nouveau francs. Easier to understand. But here's what it actually meant. Everyone holding old francs would lose 99% of face value. A savings account with 1 million francs becomes 10,000 nouveau francs. Not through inflation over time. Instantly. Through government decree. The French people understood. This was confiscation. Riots broke out in Paris. Unions called strikes. But the government pushed forward. Stage 4, new currency introduction. For 13 months, both currencies circulated. From January 1, 1960 to January 1, 1961. During this transition, prices were quoted in both old and new francs. 500,000 old francs or 5,000 nouveau francs. The same price. Gradually, The old francs were withdrawn from circulation. Banks exchanged them for nouveau francs at 100 to 1. Coins and notes were replaced. By January 1, 1961, only nouveau francs were legal tender. Stage 5. Old currency worthless. After January 1, 1961, old francs ceased to be money. You couldn't spend them. You couldn't exchange them at banks. They were collector's items. Wallpaper. And the wealth destruction was total. A worker with 200,000 francs in savings in 1958, enough to live for 5 years, had 2,000 nouveau francs in 1961. Enough to live for 2 weeks. The savings were destroyed. But the government debt? The government had borrowed millions of old francs. They repaid in nouveau francs at 100 to 1. They effectively defaulted on 99% of their obligations. The bondholders lost everything. The savers lost everything. The government's debts disappeared. This is how currency resets function. The government prints money. Inflation destroys the currency. The government resets at a confiscatory rate. Private wealth is transferred to the government. Public debt is eliminated. And it's completely legal. Let's jump forward 34 years. Brazil, 1986 to 1994. The Cruzeiro, the Cruzado, the Cruzeiro again, the Cruzeiro real, and finally the real. Multiple resets in 8 years. In 1986, Brazil's inflation was 235% annually. The currency was the Cruzeiro. Prices doubled every few months. The government was printing money to fund spending. Nobody trusted the currency. Everyone spent immediately. Velocity was exploding. The government decided to reset. Stage 1: Denial. Actually, Brazil skipped denial. By 1986, everyone admitted there was a crisis. The government had been printing for decades. Inflation had been high since the 1970s. By 1980, it was 100% annually. By 1984, 200%. By 1986, 235%. This was already hyperinflation. But the government kept printing. Why? Because they needed to fund government spending. Brazil had massive deficits. The government employed millions. They couldn't cut spending without political collapse. So they printed. And the inflation accelerated. Stage 2: Capital controls. Brazil had capital controls for decades. Since the 1960s, you couldn't freely convert cruzeiros to dollars. You needed government approval. Black market exchange rates were 50% to 100% higher than official rates. Everyone used the black market. The official controls were meaningless. But they prevented legal capital flight. Your money was trapped in Brazil unless you broke the law. Stage 3: Announcement. In February 1986, President José Sarney announced the Cruzado Plan. A new currency, the Cruzado, would replace the Cruzeiro. The exchange rate, 1,000 cruzeiros equal 1 cruzado. Everyone holding cruzeiros lost 99.9% of face value. But wait, there's more. The government also froze prices. Every price in the economy was frozen at current levels. Wages frozen. Rents frozen. This was supposed to stop inflation. It didn't. It created shortages. Producers stopped producing. Why make goods at frozen prices when costs were rising? Within months, shortages were everywhere. Meat disappeared. Flour disappeared. The economy was collapsing. And inflation didn't stop. It just slowed temporarily. By 1987, inflation was back to 200%. By 1989, 1,000%. The Cruzado reset had failed. So they tried again. Stage 4: New currency introduction. In 1989, they introduced the new Cruzado. In 1990, they went back to Cruzeiro. In 1993, they introduced the Cruzeiro Real. Each reset had a different exchange rate. Each time, savers lost wealth. The 1990 reset was especially brutal. The government not only reset the currency, they froze bank accounts. President Fernando Collor de Mello froze all accounts above 50,000 cruzeros. About $1,200. You couldn't withdraw. You couldn't transfer. Your money was frozen for 18 months. When accounts were unfrozen, inflation had destroyed the value. Money that was worth $10,000 when frozen was worth $500 when released. Complete confiscation. The middle class was destroyed. Businesses collapsed. Suicides spiked. And inflation still didn't stop. By 1994, inflation was 2,000% annually. Prices doubled every few weeks. Finally, the real solution. Not another reset. Fiscal reform. In 1994, Finance Minister Fernando Enrique Cardoso introduced the Rio Plan. This was the fourth currency reset in 8 years. The new currency was the real. But this time, they did something different. They backed it. Stage 5, old currency worthless. The exchange rate for the real was initially 1 real equals $1. Pegged. And the government did 3 critical things. First, they stopped printing money. The central bank was given independence. They couldn't print to fund deficits. Second, they cut government spending. Massively. Fired workers. Cut programs. Balanced the budget. Third, they privatized state-owned companies. Sold assets. Reduced the government's role. These reforms made the real credible. For the first time in decades, people believed the currency wouldn't be inflated away. The real held its value. Inflation dropped from 2,000% to 20% within a year. By 1996, inflation was 9%. The hyperinflation was over. But the wealth destruction was total. Let's do the math. In 1986, you had 1 million cruzeros in savings. In 1989, after the cruzado reset, you had 1,000 cruzados. In 1990, after the new cruzado, you had 1 new cruzado. In 1990 again, after returning to cruzeros, you had 1,000 cruzeros. In 1993, after Cruzero Real, you had 1 Cruzero Real. In 1994, after the Real, you had 0.000001 reals. Let me calculate the total loss. 1 million cruzeros in 1986 became effectively worthless by 1994. The exchange rate through all the resets was approximately 2.75 trillion old cruzeros to 1 real. Trillion. If you held currency through all the resets, you lost 99.9999% of your wealth. Even if you exchanged at each reset, you still lost 99.9%. Because each reset took 90% to 99%. Compound that over 4 resets. Your wealth is destroyed. Brazil used currency resets to inflate away government debt and confiscate private savings. 4 times in 8 years. And millions of Brazilians lost everything. Let's jump forward 4 years. Russia, 1998. The ruble redenomination and the overnight destruction of the middle class. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Russia became independent. The ruble was the currency. In 1991, the official exchange rate was 1 ruble to $1.7. But the Soviet economy was collapsing. Production was falling. The government was printing rubles to pay salaries and fund operations. By 1992, inflation was 2,500% annually. By 1994, the ruble had fallen to 3,000 rubles per dollar. 1,750 times devaluation in 3 years. Hyperinflation consumed the currency. Stage 1: Denial. The Russian government, led by President Boris Yeltsin and Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin, denied the ruble was in crisis. They claimed the inflation was temporary adjustment to market economy. They blamed the Soviet legacy. They blamed Western advisors. They never admitted they were printing rubles to fund a government they couldn't afford. The reality? Russia's economy had collapsed by 40% from 1991 to 1994. Tax collection had broken down. The government had no revenue. But they still had to pay salaries, pensions, military. So they printed. And by 1995, the ruble was approaching 5,000 per dollar. Something had to change. Stage 2: Capital controls. Russia had some capital controls, but they were porous. The oligarchs were moving billions out of Russia. London, Cyprus, Switzerland. The capital flight was enormous. The government tried to stop it. They restricted foreign currency transfers. They required documentation for large purchases. But enforcement was weak. Corruption was rampant. If you had connections, you could move money. If you were a regular citizen, you were trapped. Stage 3: Announcement. In 1997, the government announced currency stabilization. They would introduce new rubles. But they framed it differently than France or Brazil. They called it redenomination, not reset. It was purely technical. Simplifying transactions, not confiscation. The exchange rate, 1,000 old rubles equal 1 new ruble. The redenomination would occur on January 1, 1998. The government claimed this would restore confidence and reduce inflation. Inflation had dropped to 11% in 1997. The stabilization seemed to be working. But it was built on debt. The Russian government was borrowing heavily. GKOs, short-term treasury bonds, yielded 50% to 150% annually. The government was rolling over debt at unsustainable rates. The system was a time bomb. Stage 4: New currency introduction. On January 1, 1998, the redenomination happened. 1,000 old rubles became 1 new ruble. Bank accounts were automatically converted. Your account showed 1 million old rubles on December 31, 1997. On January 1, 1998, it showed 1,000 new rubles. Same purchasing power, supposedly. But here's what nobody expected. 6 months later, the Asian financial crisis hit. Investors panicked. They pulled money out of emerging markets, Russia included. The ruble, which had been stable at 6 new rubles per dollar, started falling. By August 1998, it was 10 per dollar. The government tried to defend it. They spent foreign reserves. They raised interest rates to 150%. Nothing worked. On August 17, 1998, the Russian government announced default. They couldn't pay the GKO bonds. They devalued the ruble. And they froze bank accounts. Again. Stage 5: Old currency worthless and new currency collapsing. The redenomination in January had taken 3 zeros off the ruble. But by December 1998, the ruble had fallen from 6 per dollar to 21 per dollar. That's 250% devaluation in 11 months. And because accounts were frozen, people couldn't withdraw to buy dollars. When the freeze lifted, the money was worth 1/3 of what it had been. But wait, it gets worse. The pre-1998 old rubles, the ones worth 1,000 to 1, were still in circulation during the transition. People had until 2003 to exchange them. When the August 1998 crisis hit, the old rubles became completely worthless. Nobody would accept them. If you still held old rubles in August 1998, you lost everything. And the people who had exchanged into new rubles? They lost 2/3 in the devaluation. Let's do the math. January 1, 1998, you have 1 million old rubles. That equals 1,000 new rubles. At 6 rubles per dollar, that's $167. By December 1998, the new ruble is 21 per dollar. Your 1,000 new rubles are worth $48. You lost 71% in 1 year. But compared to old rubles, you lost 99.9%. Because if you still held old rubles, they were worthless. The Russian middle class was destroyed. Savings evaporated. Pensions became meaningless. People who had saved for decades had nothing. Suicide spiked. Crime exploded. The social fabric collapsed. And the government's debt? Defaulted. Gone. They'd borrowed billions in rubles. They repaid in rubles worth 1/3 the value. Effective default of 66%. The bondholders lost. The savers lost. The government's obligations disappeared. Now let's look at the modern examples. Because this pattern is repeating right now in 2025. Argentina, Turkey, Egypt, Nigeria, Lebanon, all in different stages of the same currency death spiral. Argentina, Stage 4. Argentina has reset the currency multiple times. The Austral in 1985. The peso in 1992. Each time, zeros were removed. Each time, savers lost wealth. In 2023, inflation hit 211%. The peso collapsed. In December 2023, President Javier Milei took office. He devalued the peso by 54% immediately. From 400 pesos per dollar to 800. Anyone holding pesos lost half their wealth overnight. As of 2025, inflation is still 100% plus. The peso continues falling. The government talks about dollarization. Adopting the US dollar officially. If that happens, it's another reset. Your pesos become dollars at whatever exchange rate the government sets. Probably confiscatory. Argentina is in stage 4. The announcement phase. The reset is coming. Turkey, stage 3. Turkey's lira has collapsed under President Erdogan. In 2008, $1 equaled 1.5 lira. In 2025, $1 equals 34 lira. 22 times devaluation in 17 years. Inflation is officially 60%, actually closer to 100%. The government has imposed capital controls. Limits on foreign currency purchases. Restrictions on moving money abroad. They're in stage 3. Announcement coming soon. Expect a currency reset within 2 years. Egypt, stage 3. The Egyptian pound has collapsed. In 2016, $1 equaled 8 pounds. In 2025, $1 equals 50 pounds. 6 times devaluation in 9 years. The government has strict capital controls. You can't freely buy dollars. Black market rates are 20% higher than official. The IMF is demanding reforms. The government is stalling. But the pound is dying. Reset is coming. Stage 3. Nigeria, stage 3. The naira has collapsed. In 2015, $1 equaled 200 naira. In 2025, $1 equals 1,500 naira. 7.5 times devaluation in 10 years. Oil revenue has fallen. The government is printing money. Inflation is 30% officially, 50% plus in reality. Capital controls are in place. Foreign currency is rationed. Stage 3. Reset coming. Lebanon, stage 5. Lebanon already had its reset. In 2019, $1 equaled 1,500 Lebanese pounds. Official rate. By 2023, the black market rate was 90,000 pounds per dollar. 60 times devaluation in 4 years. The banking system collapsed. Deposits were frozen. People's savings disappeared. This wasn't an official currency reset. It was a de facto reset through hyperinflation and bank failure. The result is the same. Wealth destruction. Lebanon is in stage 5. The old currency is effectively worthless. A new system is being discussed. But for now, dollars circulate informally. The Lebanese pound is dead. These are happening now. 5 countries. All following the same pattern. Hyperinflation, capital controls, announcement, reset, confiscation. And the global implications are massive. If Argentina dollarizes, that's a major economy abandoning currency sovereignty. If Turkey resets, it affects Europe and the Middle East. If Egypt resets, it destabilizes North Africa. If Nigeria resets, it impacts West Africa. And they're all going to reset. The mathematics say so. You cannot print unlimited money without destroying the currency. You cannot run unlimited deficits without inflating. You cannot maintain fixed exchange rates when fundamentals are wrong. The currency resets are coming. The only question is timing. Let me show you the pattern clearly. France 1960, hyperinflation 1945 to 1958, reset January 1960, 100 to 1, wealth destruction 99%. Brazil 1994, hyperinflation 1980 to 1994, for resets 1986 to 1994, cumulative 2.75 trillion to 1, wealth destruction 99.9999%. Russia 1998, hyperinflation 1991 to 1997, reset January 1998, 1000 to 1, followed by crisis August 1998, total wealth destruction 99.9%. The pattern is consistent. The mechanism is identical. And the wealth destruction is total. And here's what makes this different from regular inflation. Regular inflation takes years. You have time to adjust. You can buy assets. You can convert to foreign currency. You can protect yourself partially. Currency reset happens overnight. You go to sleep with 100,000 in savings. You wake up with 1,000. No warning. No escape. No protection. Your wealth is simply declared to be worth less. By government decree. And you have no recourse. You can't sue. You can't protest effectively. You can't refuse. The old currency is demonetized. You must exchange it or lose everything. The government controls the banks. The banks control your account. Your money is trapped. And when the reset happens, 90% to 99% disappears. Here's why governments do this. Government debt is denominated in local currency. Brazil owed trillions of cruzeiros. They introduced the real. The debt became worthless. Effective default without officially defaulting. Russia owed billions of rubles. They redenominated. The debt was reduced 1,000 to 1. France owed millions of francs. Reset. Debt reduced 100 to 1. Currency reset is how governments default on internal debt without admitting default. They destroy the currency. They confiscate private savings to cover public debt. And they claim it's reform. Stabilization. Necessary adjustment. It's theft. Legalized. Systematic. Total. And it's coming to multiple countries right now. The question isn't if these countries will reset their currencies. The question is when, what the exchange rate will be, and whether you'll be able to protect yourself. For most people, the answer is no. You won't be able to protect yourself. Why? Because capital controls prevent escape. You can't convert to dollars above small amounts. You can't move money offshore. You can't withdraw cash in large amounts. You're trapped. And when the reset comes, your savings in the old currency become worthless. Even if you exchange them for new currency, you lose 90% to 99%. The wealth destruction is built into the exchange rate. The only protection is to get out before capital controls. Convert to hard assets. Property. Gold. Foreign currency if possible. But most people don't act until it's too late. They don't believe the government will actually confiscate their savings. They trust the system. They wait. And when the announcement comes, the capital controls are already in place. The exits are closed. They're trapped. And they lose everything. This is happening in Argentina right now. People see the peso collapsing. They want to buy dollars. The government limits dollar purchases to 200 per month. You can't protect your savings at 200 per month. Your wealth is being destroyed while you watch. And when the dollarization happens, you'll exchange pesos for dollars at whatever rate the government sets. Probably 50% to 70% loss. Maybe more. You'll have no choice. This is happening in Turkey. People want to hold dollars or euros. The government restricts it. They want to buy gold. The government taxes it. They want to move money abroad. The government blocks it. They're trapped. And when the reset comes, they'll lose most of their savings. This is the pattern. This is the mechanism. And this is what's coming to multiple countries in the next 2 to 5 years. 3 times in 65 years. France 1960. Brazil 1994. Russia 1998. 3 currency resets. 3 complete confiscations of private wealth. All following the exact same 5-stage pattern. Denial, capital controls, announcement, new currency introduction, old currency worthless. And right now in 2025, 5 more countries are in this pattern. Argentina Stage 4. Turkey Stage 3. Egypt Stage 3. Nigeria Stage 3. Lebanon already in Stage 5. The resets are coming. The wealth destruction is coming. And for the people holding those currencies, there is no escape. The capital controls are in place. The governments are preparing the announcements. The new currencies are being designed. And when they're introduced, everyone holding old currency loses 90% to 99% of their savings. Overnight. By decree. Legally. This isn't conspiracy. This is documented history repeated 3 times and preparing to repeat 5 more times. The mathematics say currency reset is inevitable when government debt is unpayable and inflation is uncontrollable. And right now, multiple governments have unpayable debt and uncontrollable inflation. The question isn't if the resets happen. The question is what the exchange rates will be, how much wealth will be destroyed, and whether anyone will learn the lesson before the next reset in 2050. Because the pattern repeats every 30 to 40 years. And it always destroys the savings of people who trusted their government to protect their money.